Hello, this is Brendan O'Connor with the Wyoming Professional Teaching Standards Board. Happy to present for the Wyoming School University Partnership. To start off, it's a good reminder for us all what the mission of PTSB is to ensure that every student is served by competent, ethical educators who meet rigorous performance standards. Some of the main features of the Professional Teaching Standards Board, the one that most people are familiar with, is educator licensure. So we get all of the applications for licensure for educators, administrators, substitutes, coaches, school counselors, school psychs, other related services. We gather all of that information, make sure everything is verified and authenticated, and then we send out the certificates or credentials to those educators. PTSB also tracks all of the professional development credits that educators earn during the validity of their license, and we use that to determine if they are eligible to renew that license using those credits. The University of Wyoming, College of Education, and Central Wyoming College both have approved educator preparation programs that PTSB staff do periodically review and the board approves. We look at national standards if they're available, or state standards that have been developed for educator preparation. These are not student standards. These are what does a potential teacher need to be able to know and do in order to get that license or that endorsement. And so we monitor those, we look at those, we gather stakeholders who look at the standards, look at the programs and the evidence that the programs provide, and determine if they are meeting those standards, and provide feedback, both positive, you're doing really well in this area, and some areas for consideration of how to make the program better. And the least fun part about PTSB is that we do occasionally have to take discipline actions against educators' licenses or permits. And so we are regulating that license or permit. It is a property right of the individual who holds that. And so we take this very seriously while we are looking to uphold both educator standards and ethical standards of behavior. Our due process procedures are found in our Chapter 9 rules. In our statutory authorization, it shows that the board may revoke, suspend, deny, or refuse to renew certification for any of those on the list that you see, so that we can deny an application if it's a new application or a renewal. If some evidence has come up that it's like, there's something on this list that educator has done, there may need to be some additional action taken, can be denied to be issued, or if it has been issued, any of those other avenues are available to the board. So the types of offenses that we most commonly see are listed in roughly the number of instances over the last 5 years of the number of cases. So sexual misconduct is often the top issue that we have to deal with. Closely tied to that is inappropriate actions or communications with students, or could be with another adult. If there's sexual misconduct, often that inappropriate communication is tied in there with it, but they do not have to go together. There can be inappropriate communication that does not end in a sexual misconduct. Third most prevalent that we've had cases of is illegal substance use or alcohol use while on school property or at a school function. Theft or fraud, that can be whether misusing school credit card, misusing the band booster fundraising money for personal gain. School property can be used, or other kinds of fraud in that case. Falsifying student records. Unfortunately, we've seen some cases where educators have erased student records, student answers on bubble sheets and colored in the correct answers. We've also seen cases of where an educator, in reporting about student report that they needed to fill out, was copying and pasting from other students into the one report, often with irrelevant information, and just trying to knock out a number of reports without doing it due justice and truly serving those students. And thankfully, violence is not a common occurrence, but we have had some cases, and that can be violence against a student or violence against another adult. So when Professional Teaching Standards Board office receives a complaint against a licensee, we issue that to an investigative committee. If it's an already issued license that we're looking at, if it's a new application, it goes to an application review committee. Both types of committees are made up of at least 2 board members, and we often have 2 of those different types of committees, so that we have about 4 board members investigating committees and 4 board members participating on application review. So as we go through any of these, and in this case we're going to talk about discipline on an active license, the investigative committee can look at the evidence, they look at the complaint, the person being complained against, the license holder, gets to state their case. That's part of the due process, is that we don't just take action without hearing from the person being accused. Then the investigative committee can then determine whether it's like, this is just misunderstanding, it's not really a licensable offense. We're just going to recommend dismissing this complaint. Could be that there is something a little more to it. It doesn't rise to a high sanction area. So maybe an advisory letter. It's like, you're getting really close to a line here that you should not cross over. We want to stop you before that. We're going to recommend some training, some additional PD, something, maybe some counseling, whatever you might need to get you back regulating yourself a little more effectively. The next level would be a settlement agreement. And this can be one where there's enough professional development or training needed that the individual would need to say, yes, I agree, I need this help, I need something else here, I don't want to fully lose my license, I will do what steps I need to take to maintain my license, but also to correct behavior or rectify what I've done. And so it's a settlement, it's an agreement between the board and the license holder. The board can suspend a license, and that can take effect immediately. It's called summary suspension if we're notified that something very serious and drastic is happening and they need to be pulled out of their employment, out of the classroom, for example, right away, suspended for a short amount of time while the investigation happens. That keeps students safe, keeps other adults safe, keeps the educator allowing him to maintain or her to have their due process fully worked through. Suspensions can also happen while they're doing their settlement agreement. If they're doing some professional development, it's like, we're going to suspend you. You're not going to be able to be employed until we have proof that this is done. So there's various avenues of that. They can maintain employment while they are under a settlement agreement, but then if it leads to a suspension, they would be out of employment because they wouldn't have an active license. The next most serious case would be a voluntary surrender. In this case, the individual is voluntarily turning over their license back to the board. This is a nice outcome in some pretty serious cases, meaning, yes, I recognize what I've done, and I am not going to argue this anymore. I'm not planning on maintaining employment in education. I know I need to do something different. Here's my license back. In many cases, this comes out because the individual is incarcerated for whatever behavior they've done, or perhaps a different behavior. And so they obviously can't be employed while they're incarcerated, They also know that whatever the offense is, it's not good for employment in an educational setting, so they will voluntarily surrender that license and just be done with it. The most serious case would be a revocation, and in that case, the license holder is still holding on to their license. The board is acting to revoke or take that license back. And so that is the most serious outcome of a discipline offense. There are many steps through that. As I talked about at the beginning, both sides get to say their side of the story. It goes through an appeals process. It can go all the way up to a hearing. A hearing is basically like a trial in effect, but it doesn't have any of the criminal offenses. It's all about the license itself. And so it can go all the way up to that. The Office of Administrative Hearing oversees any hearings that our board deals with. They can provide recommendations, or they can make a judgment on the outcome of that hearing, and then the board can take action whether to approve whatever the recommendation from OAH was, or they can say, no, we're going to do this other thing. We recognize your recommendation. We're going to do something else. But it does give that individual the opportunity many times to state their case, to go all the way through the process until a final outcome is achieved. Once the board has taken any action, and that can be a denial of an application to begin with, or any of these other steps, we report it to the NASDAQ clearinghouse. And NASDAQ is the National Association of State Directors of Teacher Education and Certification. PTSB is a member, full member of NASDAQ, and so we have access to the database. We can report any of our cases so that the nation, every jurisdiction, all the states and territories can log in and have access. Our members of NASDAQ Clearinghouse, they can check if any licenses in Wyoming have had any disciplinable offenses noted. They can see what's going on, and then they can determine on their end whether to proceed with filling an application or not. We do the same with out-of-state individuals as well. So they're coming in and something flags for us. We look on the NASDAQ database, the clearinghouse. If we see what's going on, then we can, often in that case, if we're just getting an application in from an out-of-stater, we would deny that if there's something pretty egregious, or we would ask for additional information from the applicant, and the application review committee would weigh that out, give them a chance to say their piece, see what happens, get additional information, and then determine whether to issue a license or still maintain that denial. School districts and educator prep programs can become associate members of NASDAQ. You can see the link that I provided for more information about that. And then you could look for yourselves as an associate member. You can have access to the clearinghouse and check on if any potential employee has any license issues, whether in Wyoming or whether in another state. This link that I provide goes to basically a 3-minute informational commercial for the Educator Identification Clearinghouse. It just kind of talks a little bit more about it. Codes of conduct. PTSB does have a code of conduct, and you see the link that you can get it from our website. Codes of conduct are often written as a thou shalt not do this behavior. Codes of ethics are often set up as a self-regulation prior to. It's like, consider your behaviors and the consequences of that. PTSB's code of conduct kind of mixes the two together. We have some of the thou shalt nots. We also have some of those consider the consequences before pursuing this action. NASDAQ has developed the Model Code of Ethics for Educators. You see a link to that. It's now in its 2nd edition. It's been modified a little bit to maintain it as a living document that incorporates new best practices for educators, new ethical considerations. So again, this is a self-regulation. It's also a accountability that you can use as you're looking at these ethics. Like, I'm texting students at 10:30 at night, and it's not school related or athletics or activities related. It's like, that's a boundary that I have crossed. I need to rein that back in, or I'm going to face some pretty serious consequences. If I give this student a ride home after practice and there's no one else in the car, there may be future consequences that I might just be trying to do that as a nice gesture, but there may be fallout from that I didn't intend, but it crosses that ethical boundary. So it just sets up some of those kind of situations, some of those thought process. What could be the outcome of my behavior? And so I want to act in a way that there will be no question about what my behavior is. So like, my behavior is forthright and it's upstanding, and that's going to help me stay out of a lot of gray areas. Some of the main principles that the Model Code of Ethics covers: obviously responsibility to the profession, being a professional, having professional competence. What are your responsibilities for students, the community, ethical use of technology? Over the last 10 years, we've seen a lot more cases of misuse of technology by educators, and sometimes it's unintended. Again, it's that what are those consequences? We've had, unfortunately, we have some cases, particularly with Apple products, that sync to each other. And if you're issued a school Apple product and you have a personal Apple product, sometimes those can get synced together. You might not want those synced together. You may have some things on your personal device that you do not want on your school issued device. So be careful about that. These are those ethical concerns. Should I mix my personal and my school issued or my employee issued technology? No, you probably shouldn't. But also, what are you doing with those? How could that be viewed in a larger community, in a hearing? Would you want to see that on the front page of your local newspaper? Some good practices that districts can do to help the profession as well. Often we hear the term "don't pass the trash," or giving somebody else a lemon. If as a district administrator, you do not let that employee, because they have done some questionable acts, or you're not quite sure, something just seems off, yes, you have the right and privilege to not employ them, but also don't set them up for continuing that behavior in a different district. That's what the "don't pass the trash" stands, or that concept is about. It's like, yeah, it might get stickier or complicated if we send this to PTSB and there's a discipline of actions and all of that. We'll try to skip that. We're just not going to renew your contract, but you just go away. Well, that sets somebody else up to deal with that. Report any suspected or actual activities. So we do appreciate when school districts are forthright and come out and say, this happened, this educator did this event, I'm filing a complaint against their license. If you don't want to, as the employer, the PTSB staff have the authority to file complaints on your behalf. So you can say, I might not want to do this, but this needs to be taken back, or needs to be some action taken. Here's the information about it. PTSB then would file the complaint. The license holder would again get to state their case. It would go through the investigative committee, go through all of the due process that we've discussed earlier. That is true with parent offense complaints that we receive. Sometimes they don't want their name associated with it. We do get their name so that we can follow up with them, but if they say, we'd rather you do that, we can follow up. We would provide the evidence that we have been provided with, And then again, it goes through both sides, get to state their case, go through the whole process. And then document. That's always a good training, especially in any situation. If you're interviewing someone, if you're having a situation, you're debriefing with others, document what steps you've taken. If it's been a Title IX case, did you follow all of the Title IX procedures? Can you document that you've done that? If there's been some other incident going on, what intervention did you try? What steps did you take? What records did you keep? And so that helps protect you. It also does help protect the educator as well, because then you can say, no, we were here. This is our notes. They would say, yes, I agree with that. I disagree maybe with that interpretation. That we work out through the investigative process. But make sure that you have your ducks in a row, that you are documenting all of your evidence, meetings, notes, conversations, so forth. It really helps you out. It helps us out if we're taking action against this, potentially taking action against the license. We can say, yes, nope, they followed all of their procedures. Everything is right on track of what they're supposed to do. It's following the timelines. It's calling in all of the relevant players. It's doing all of this. And then that helps us as we're doing our investigation say, well, okay, if you as the license holder not refute any of that with your own documentation, we're probably going to decide on the case of where the documentation shows that it is following the procedures as outlined. Contact information is available on the screen. We welcome your questions, your comments, your complaints that you send in to us. Even if you're just not sure, think that seems a little, I think something needs to be done about that. Send it to us. We will start the process. Again, it can go for a dismissal. It could go all the way up to the person losing their license. Again, it depends on the severity of the case and what all is involved. So in doubt, report something. We'll get it figured out one way or the other. Conversely, you may also receive complaints against your license as an educator. That is nothing personal about it. It's just part of the due process. You were named as a participant in the complaint, and the person doing the complaining has stated you've misused our rules or you've broken our rules in some way. They would provide their evidence, you would provide yours. We go through the same process. But either way, if you do have questions, give us a call. We're happy to answer. If you'd like us to present more information about this, we're happy to come out to your district and do that, or to do a webinar, any kind of situation that you would like to have more information about PTSB, both discipline, licensure, professional development, program approval, whatever. We're happy to be a state agency that is working for the benefit of the students of Wyoming, for the benefit of the educators of Wyoming, and for the benefit of the school districts and communities of Wyoming. So thank you for your time. We look forward to hearing from you.